Conservation can seem like a daunting task. We humans share our planet with millions of other animal species, big and small, that make up a worldwide ecosystem we continuously interact with. In order to sustain these interactions, growing food, breathing clean air, building shelter, we as a species find ourselves with a responsibility to keep the biosphere intact. But what can one person do? Some of the challenges our creature cousins face are unfathomably complex, and not everyone is an expert on what to do. Most people wouldn't even know where to start. So I'm starting this series. The world is filled with wonder, and I believe the first step to helping anyone of any species is understanding them. I'm a videographer, not a career scientist, but with the help of my colleagues at Creature Conserve, I'm going everywhere I can to document the animals we live with, explain who they are, and help us all learn a little bit more about what they need to survive. In order to meet other people where they are, I'm starting this series off simple, in my backyard. I live in suburban Warwick, Rhode Island, in the northeastern USA. It's not a hotspot of animal diversity like the Amazon, but don't let that fool you. There's still a surprising number of species to be found here, even without leaving home. I figured I'd start with a common but overlooked group, the solitary bees. Most of us are familiar with the European honeybee. They've become widespread in North America, and they live in large hives, producing honey harvested by beekeepers. They also perform an arguably more important task. They pollinate plants, continuing botanical life cycles and keeping our agricultural industries afloat. But European honeybees aren't the only ones that do this. In fact, as the name suggests, they're not even native to North America. The majority of pollinating bee species belong to the solitary bees, members of North America's wild bee population. This group is extremely diverse and includes just about every native backyard bee besides the bumblebees, who are just as delightful, but eusocial, meaning that they live in hives with queens and workers. Where bumblebees are hefty, buzzing from flower to flower, most solitary bees are small and nimble. Their priorities are the same as other bees, though. They visit flowers, collect nectar and pollen, and bring it back to their nests to feed their young. The difference, as the name implies, is that they're usually the only adults in their nests, and they rear their larvae on their own. The first that I found in my yard were the sweat bees. This is a bicolored, striped sweat bee, a female. She's just under the size of a yellow jacket hornet, but instead of the standard bee black and yellow, her thorax, the middle segment of her body, is a glittering metallic green. Her family, the sweat bees, get their name because they apparently like human sweat, enough to land on people and start licking it up. I can't vouch for that. It's about 90 degrees. I had been out here for hours, and nothing had landed on me besides tiger mosquitoes. The sweat bees are a large group. While they're not considered eusocial, they do span an equally large range of social behavior. Some, like this pure green sweat bee I found near the yard gate, are completely solitary and live in their burrows alone. Others, like the bicolored, may live in a burrow with multiple females, but they don't organize beyond that. Then there's the furrow bees, which are part of the sweat bee group, but some, like this ligated furrow bee, have much more complex behavior. They still burrow into the ground, but the ligatus do form primitive eusocial colonies, with several bees performing different tasks. It seems like a successful strategy, too. The majority of furrow bees out here are ligated. I wonder where their nest is. I also found orange-legged furrow bees, which are closely related but only exhibit their colony behavior in certain climates. Here, where the elevation is low and the summers are longer, they're likely doing the same as the ligated furrow bees, but in colder areas, they stay solitary. According to an article I found by Douglas Yanega, an entomologist at UC Riverside, there can even be populations that do both behaviors at once. As I look closer, there are many smaller bees on the flowers I was filming. Some of them are no longer than my pinky nail. These are members of the Lasioglossum, tiny sweat bees, some metallic, some dull. I tried to research them, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of information about the species that live in Rhode Island. From my point of view, they're prolific, they like smaller flowers, and again are completely uninterested in my sweat. Sweat bees aren't the only solitary bees, but they're by far the most common in my yard. I was starting to wonder if I'd see any other groups like mining bees or carpenter bees. Then I noticed something towards the back of my grandmother's garden. That is a patchwork leafcutter bee. Not only that, but it's one building her nest right here, just inches from the edge of the yard. The leafcutters are a true solitary wonder. Not only do they build their nests alone, but they wrap their eggs in leaves that they harvest themselves, so that their young develop in a protected cocoon. I've come back a day later and you can actually see she's filled up her little hole with cuttings of leaves. It seems she's actually expanding and may have multiple entrances to her hole, considering I just saw her fly in there. I believe I have found where she is cutting from. It's about 3 feet away from her little hole, and she just darted out. I assumed to grab some more leaves, but that's about the shape we were looking for. I didn't have to wait long to see her in action. This part of the garden is full of maple seedlings, and they seem to be her favorite. I watched her fly back and forth, cutting out these perfect little circles, then carrying them to her nest. And this was where I realized why we don't see solitary bees like her more. The biggest threats to native bees in New England are habitat loss and pesticides, both of which are constant in suburbia where I live. We're one of the few houses on the street that plant native plants and leave areas of the yard full of detritus untouched. And that untouched habitat is exactly what these bees need to build their nests and survive. The constant digging and construction around here likely destroys bee burrows left and right, and pesticides meant to only kill quote-unquote pest animals like ants and wasps take bees as collateral. Thinking about this is discouraging, but the upside is that these are problems that small groups of ordinary people can try and rectify. Most of the plants I found the bees on were natives planted by my grandmother in an effort to attract pollinators, like mountain mint, coreopsis, and purple coneflower. These are sources of food for solitary bees and their young. Undisturbed substrates of soil, stone, wood, and detritus can be maintained to create shelter for all manner of bee nests. And of course, reducing pesticide use means that more bees survive to reproduce at all. I've learned there's a lot more bees in my backyard than I thought. They're a crucial part of our ecosystem, pollinating where social bees can't, living complex lives, full of behavior, in some cases just waiting to be studied. And the best part is they can live anywhere with a little bit of help. All I had to do was walk outside and look for them. I hope in the future we can readily apply this to more species and maintain our world for all creatures to enjoy, human and not.